9:07 on a Tuesday morning in November. A courier van pulled into the lot at Kellner Woodcraft and left the engine running. The driver climbed out, unlatched the back panel, and began sliding out flat crates without ceremony. 14 of them stacked in pairs, each one sealed with industrial tape that had already started to peel at the corners. He dropped a clipboard on the workbench without looking up. Director Ashford says keep whatever you can use, rest goes to the bin. The woman standing at the doorway of the shop did not move. She watched the driver set the last crate on the concrete and sign his own form, which was something people did when they did not expect a signature in return. He pulled out of the lot at 9:19. The crate stayed. Nora Kellner was 38 years old. She had run the shop since her father's second stroke, which had been 4 years ago, and which had taken his right hand along with it in every practical sense. The shop was hers now, in the way that things become yours when no one else is left. She crossed the floor and lifted the corner of the first crate with a pry bar. The wood inside was wrapped in brown paper, the paper torn in places, showing the edge of something pale and figured underneath. She set the pry bar down and pulled the paper back with both hands. She went still. Her hands did not shake from cold. They shook from something older than that. 15 years ago, she herself had planed this panel. She had been 23, an apprentice in her father's shop, and she had spent 6 days getting the grain to match across the joint. Her father had come and stood behind her and said nothing for a full minute, which was how she had known it was right. 3 months from now, the company that had left these crates on her floor would send a lawyer to get them back. She covered the panel again. She did not do it gently. The shop was quiet except for the hum of the dust collector she had forgotten to switch off. She walked from crate to crate, lifting each corner just far enough to read what was inside. 14 panels in total. Figured maple, quarter-sawn oak, one large sheet of burled walnut that she recognized by the inclusion near the lower left edge. Before she had even finished unwrapping it, she had sourced that piece herself from a mill in Lanark County. She had driven 4 hours each way to select it in person because the photographs had not been enough. She knew every one of these panels. She had touched every one of them. By 10 o'clock, she had the bay doors closed and her phone in her hand. She dialed the one number she had not called in 2 years. "Fletcher, it's me. I need you at the shop. There's something you have to see." Fletcher Dowd arrived the next morning in a pickup that looked like it had survived a decade of northern winters by sheer stubbornness. He walked into the bay, stopped just inside the doors, and did not speak for almost a full minute. He crouched in front of the burled walnut and read the grain with his fingertips, the way a person reads something they already know by heart. Ashford was actually going to bin them. Nora handed him the disposal order. He read it once, then turned it over as though looking for something on the back that would make it make sense. 4 years of your work. Sitting in these crates like lumber. He stood up. He was 61 and had been her father's lead joiner for 22 years before the shop had lost the Ashford Interiors contract and half its staff along with it. He looked at her with something that was not quite anger and not quite grief. "You need to hear something. Marcus Ashford picked your father's shop in 2011. There were 4 other contractors on the short list, all of them larger, all of them better capitalized. He chose Kellner because your father was the only craftsman he had ever met who understood what a bespoke panel was supposed to feel like from the inside out. He told me that himself at the mill the year they started the Rosedale project." Nora did not answer. She had known some of this, not all of it, and the reason you lost the contract in 2020, it was not only the budget review. Someone on the procurement side, Renwick, sat on your final payment for 4 months while your father was in the hospital. $87,000. They told you it was contingent on a completion clause you couldn't satisfy because they'd changed the specification mid-project without a written amendment. You walked away with the debt and none of the credit. Nora set both hands flat on the workbench. Marcus was in Vancouver when it happened. He came back and tried to sort it. He had a cardiac event before he could finish. She had not known that last part. His daughter doesn't know any of it. She's been running the company for 14 months. She came in with a spreadsheet and a grief she hasn't finished with yet, and Renwick has been in her ear since the beginning. She doesn't know who you are. She doesn't know what these panels are worth. Fletcher studied her for a long count. You're going to restore 14 panels and let her think you're a mill shop she insulted. I'm going to restore 14 panels because they deserve to be restored. What she does with the rest of it is hers to figure out. Fletcher exhaled slowly, the way a man does when he has already decided to agree and just needs a moment to finish deciding. All right, what do you need? Your hands. 8 weeks. And the hide glue formula you never wrote down, you've got all 3. That same evening, in a glass-walled office on the 14th floor in Toronto, Camille Ashford sat at a long table, reviewing quarterly projections she had already reviewed twice that morning. She closed the folder and let her eyes travel to the wall behind her desk, where her father had hung a single photograph. Marcus in 2013, standing at a workbench beside a woman in a shop apron, both of them looking down at a panel of figured maple with the focused pleasure of people who have just gotten something exactly right. The other woman's face was angled away from the camera. Camille had walked past that photograph 100 times in 14 months and had never thought to ask who she was. She turned off the desk lamp and reached for her coat. At Kellner Woodcraft, a girl appeared from the small office at the back of the shop carrying 2 mugs. She was 10 years old, with her mother's precision and her father's capacity for silence in the face of something she did not yet fully understand. Her name was Ivy, and she handed 1 mug to Fletcher without ceremony. Fletcher crouched to her height. Your mum used to build furniture that ended up in homes people saved for their whole lives, he told her. She didn't tell you the whole story. She's the only person I know who can bring these back to what they were. Ivy considered this with the gravity that only a 10-year-old can sustain. Then I'll bring her tea every night until she's done. Fletcher laughed for the first time in months. Nora watched them both from the bench, and for the first time in a long while, she did not feel alone inside her own shop. By Thursday of the first week, Nora and Fletcher were running 12-hour days. The walnut panel was on the flattening table. 3 of the maple sheets had been cleaned back to bare wood, which had revealed that the damage was surface only, which was better than she had let herself hope. Nora's hands moved with the certainty of someone who had learned this work before she had learned to drive. That morning, Camille Ashford's assistant called. Procurement needed 1 additional sign-off, and Ms. Ashford preferred to handle it in person at a neutral location. The Temperance Coffee Bar, downtown Toronto, 11 o'clock. Nora washed her hands twice. She did not change her work shirt. There was a streak of linseed oil along the left cuff that had been there since Monday and was not coming out, and she did not pretend otherwise. The coffee bar was full at 11. A morning crowd at the bar, a woman with a laptop at the window, 2 men in suits near the door. Camille Ashford had taken the center table. She sat with her legal counsel on her left and 2 junior associates on her right. A flat white in front of each of them. Across from her, an empty chair and a glass of water already poured, which was the kind of detail that told you something about a person. Nora arrived at 8 minutes past. The bell above the door rang. She had a copy of the disposal order in one hand and nothing in the other. She stopped just inside to unbutton her coat. Camille looked up, let her eyes travel from Nora's work boots to the stain on her cuff, and said, at a volume clearly intended for the adjacent table, Mrs. Kellner, I'm sure the drive-in from wherever your shop is was long enough that you could have found time to change. Or is there not a distinction up there between a workshop and a business meeting? The junior associate on her right made a sound that was almost a laugh. The woman at the window looked up from her laptop. A man at the bar lifted his coffee cup and did not put it down. Nora did not break stride. She crossed to the table, pulled out the chair opposite Camille, sat down, and reached for the document on top of the stack. May I read this? Take whatever time you need. We're not billing you. The junior associate made the sound again. Nora took her time. She read Clause 1. She read Clause 2. She read Clause 3. She turned the page and read Clause 4.1 twice. She picked up the pen Camille's counsel offered and signed in 2 places without comment. She pushed the document back across the table. She did not raise her voice. She did not look away. Are you certain you don't want panel 14 back, Ms. Ashford? The burled walnut. Your father sourced it from a mill in Lanark County. Camille's hand stopped on her coffee cup. She had heard something in that sentence that did not fit with what she thought she was looking at. She set the cup down without drinking. Nora stood. She picked up her coat, folded it over her arm, nodded once to the legal counsel, and walked back through the room and out. Through the door the bell rang once. Camille sat very still. The junior associate tried to say something and could not locate the right register. Legal counsel cleared his throat. Unusual woman, Camille said. She did not finish her coffee. She gathered the documents herself, which she never did, and walked out ahead of her own team. The man at the bar watched her go. She drove back to the office with the radio off. She told herself the discomfort was nothing. A workshop owner who had read a contract carefully. A woman in a stained shirt who had not flinched when she was supposed to. Nothing. But Lanark County sat in her chest the way a stone sits in a boot. She had not told anyone which panel was which. She had not looked at the manifest herself. Renwick had handled the crating. Renwick had arranged the courier. Renwick had signed the disposal order with the delegated authority she had given him in her second week, when the weight of everything had still been too much to let her read every document that crossed her desk. How did the workshop woman know there was a panel 14? How did she know what was in it? How did she know where it came from? By the start of the second week, Camille had her personal solicitor reviewing every disposal contract Renwick had initiated in the past 3 years. She found 6 with an unusual clause granting the receiving party permanent discretionary rights. All 6 had been signed under her delegated authority. All 6 had gone through Renwick. She read her father's will again that night, slowly with a pencil in her hand, marking every clause she had moved past too quickly in the early weeks of grief. There were 5. One of them stopped her. The Kellner archive panels shall not be destroyed, deaccessioned, or otherwise disposed of without the written consent of the originating craftsperson. She read the clause 3 times. She underlined originating. She underlined craftsperson. She had not known the panels had a name attached to them. She had not thought to look. On Wednesday, she drove to Kellner Woodcraft without telling her office. She walked in at 3:15, and the first thing she saw was Fletcher Dowd at the parts bench, sorting pieces of veneer into 2 piles with the focused patience of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. She knew him. He had been at her father's funeral. He had stood at the back and had not come forward. Mr. Dowd. Fletcher looked up. He glanced once at Nora, who gave the smallest nod. "What are you doing here, Miss Ashford?" "Helping a friend." She turned toward the main bench. Nora was at the flattening table, sleeves pushed up, a card scraper in her hand. Panel 14 sat on a clean trestle beside her. It no longer looked like something someone had decided to throw away. It looked like something that had been waiting to be found. "Who are you, Miss?" "Kellner?" "A woodworker. Woodworkers don't get Fletcher Dowd driving down from Barrie to sort veneer for free." Nora set the scraper down. She looked at Camille for a long count and said nothing. Camille held her gaze longer than she had held anyone's in over a year. She did not feel suspicion. She felt something she did not have a word for yet. She left without asking again. That night she pulled the photograph off her father's office wall and held it under a desk lamp. The woman in the shop apron, her face turned away, her hands resting on the maple panel. Long, capable hands. A pale scar across the knuckle of the right index finger, the kind that comes from a slip of a chisel. She had seen that scar 3 days ago in a coffee bar, holding a pen. In the 3rd week, Camille came to the shop 3 times. She did not explain herself. The first time she sat in the small office and drank the tea that was on the burner. The second time she brought a book and read half of it. The third time she walked out to the main bench and stood 10 feet from where Nora was fitting a spline into the quarter-sawn oak, and she watched her hands. Ivy came in from school at 4:30. She set her backpack on the office chair, walked into the shop, saw Camille, and "I did. Do you want to read with me? I have a book about trees, the ones that make the best wood." Camille opened her mouth to say no. She said yes. They sat in the office with the book open on the low table between them. Ivy explained the difference between radial and tangential shrinkage, the way only a serious 10-year-old can, with complete authority and occasional tangents about her favorite tree, which was the black walnut, because of the smell. Camille laughed once. It was the first time she had laughed since her father died. At the bench, Nora slowed her hands. She did not look up, she did not stop working, but she wiped the same joint 3 times. The next morning, Camille drove to Barrie and parked outside Fletcher Dowd's house. He answered the door in a faded shop apron with sawdust on his collar. "Mr. Dowd, who made the Kellner archive panels?" He looked at her for a long moment. He still had a non-disclosure agreement he had signed in 2020 that had outlived any purpose it was meant to serve. "You've already met her." "Where?" "You already know where." She drove back toward Toronto. She did not go to the shop. She parked 2 blocks down the street and watched the light come through the bay windows. She saw Nora show Ivy how to hold a marking gauge. She saw her laugh at something the girl said. She did not go in. Friday morning, Renwick appeared in her office with a slim folder and the particular calm of a man who believed he was about to be useful. "You need to see this. Nora Kellner may be in breach of the non-compete she signed in 2020. If she completes the restoration and the panels are attributed to her publicly, we have grounds to pursue an injunction, recover all 14 units, and claim damages for unauthorized use of proprietary design specifications." He set the folder on her desk. On top was a photograph from 2013. Nora at a workbench, Marcus Ashford's hand on her shoulder, both of them looking at a panel of figured maple that Camille recognized even in the small print of an old photograph. Camille looked at that photograph for 10 seconds without speaking. Let her finish. "The moment attribution is made, we act. She loses the shop. Thank you, Gavin. Leave it with me." When he was gone, she put the folder in the bottom drawer of her desk and turned the key. She did not know yet what she was going to do. She knew one thing. Renwick had built this file. Renwick knew exactly who Nora Kellner was. Renwick had still signed the disposal order, which meant Renwick had wanted Nora to receive those panels. She did not know why, not yet. On Monday of the 4th week, Camille drove to Kellner Woodcraft with a cardboard box on the passenger seat. Her father had kept it in the locked cabinet of his private office, and she had moved it twice without opening it, once when she had cleared his desk and once when she had moved offices herself, stepping into a room that still smelled like him. The key had been in his coat pocket. She had found it when she finally gave the coat away. She set the box on the workbench. Her hand stayed on the lid for a moment before she lifted it away. "My father kept this in his office. I have never opened it. I want you to open it with me." Nora wiped her hands on a clean cloth. She lifted the lid. The box held 3 things: a folded letter on Marcus Ashford's personal stationery, the cream paper with a small embossed A in the corner, a USB drive on a short key chain, a sealed envelope marked addendum in Marcus's handwriting, the letters slanting the way they always had. Camille opened the letter first. It was dated March 2020. It was addressed to Marcus's personal solicitor and had never been sent. She read it aloud. Her voice was steady through the first paragraph and quieter through the rest. Marcus had discovered through a private audit he had commissioned without telling his board that Gavin Renwick had been falsifying disposal records since 2017. The items listed as destroyed, archive panels, prototype furnishings, bespoke millwork, had not been destroyed. They had been sold to private collectors and interior dealers in Montreal, New York, and London, routed through a numbered company registered in Nova Scotia. The letter included dates, account references, and the names of 3 brokers. Marcus had written that he intended to terminate Renwick the following month. He had also written that he intended to restore Nora Kellner's contract in full, along with the $87,000 that had been withheld from her final payment with interest. He had suffered a cardiac event 6 weeks after writing the letter. Camille set it down. Her hand was steady. Her breath was not. She opened the addendum. It was notarized and witnessed by 2 people she did not know. It named Nora Kellner as Heritage Craft Trustee for the Ashford Archive Collection, with a 10% equity stake in Ashford Interiors contingent upon the formal reconstitution of the archive program. The USB held the complete record of Renwick's false disposal contracts, dates, buyers, wire confirmations, cross-referenced against internal Ashford records going back 7 years. Camille did not cry. Her hands settled slowly onto the bench on either side of the open box, one on each side, the way a person steadies themselves against something large. "I signed a piece of paper giving you $400 to haul away 14 panels, worth considerably more than that. I called your shop a workshop in a tone that was not a compliment. You were given wrong information and not enough time. That's different from being foolish. Why didn't you tell me from the start? Because you didn't know who I was. Telling you would have meant asking you to take my word for something you had no way to verify yet. I needed to restore these panels whether you believed me or not. Your father built this archive. It deserved the chance." Camille looked at her for a long time. The afternoon light came through the bay window and caught the line of Nora's jaw and the pale scar on her right hand and the grain of the walnut panel drying in its cradle 10 feet away. "My father chose you. Your father was a careful man. He never told me about the addendum. I would have refused it. I'm not my father. No, but you don't have to be. You can be yourself." Ivy appeared from the back office with 2 mugs. She handed one to Camille. There was a thin mint leaf floating on top, placed there with the exactness of a child who considers presentation important. Dad says when people have a hard day, tea helps more than coffee. I made it the way Mum likes it. Camille took the mug. She held it in both hands. She did not put it down. That night, from the parking lot of a grocery store in East Toronto, she called her personal solicitor on her mobile. Emergency meeting. Tomorrow, 7 in the morning. Every disposal contract from the past 4 years, and Henry, don't tell anyone, especially not Gavin. By the end of the 5th week, Panel 1 was ready for its final inspection. Nora had set it on the viewing stand under the full-spectrum lights she used for color matching. Fletcher stood at the data clipboard noting the final grain alignment readings. Nora had not slept more than 4 hours in 12 days. Her hands were steady. Ivy sat on the high stool in the corner with her book and her ear defenders, which she wore in the shop, more out of solidarity than necessity. Camille stood beside Nora, 2 feet from the panel itself. She had taken off her jacket. Her sleeves were pushed to the elbow, which Nora had not seen her do before. "You finish it? Me?" My father always had someone from outside the craft side do the final wipe down on a completed piece. He said it was how you knew the work would accept a new pair of hands. Camille picked up the soft cloth. She looked at Nora once. Nora nodded. Camille drew the cloth across the surface of the maple panel in one long, even stroke. The figure in the wood caught the light and moved under it, the way good maple does, not a single surface but a depth, a shimmer, something alive under the polish. Fletcher set down his clipboard. "What did you do to the grain preparation, Nora?" "I had 4 years to think about how I'd do it better." Camille did not move for a long moment. She was looking at the panel she had paid $400 to throw away. She was looking at it the way her father had looked at it in the photograph. Then she picked up her phone and walked to the corner of the shop. "Mr. Pellerin, Camille Ashford. I have 14 restored archive panels in Kellner condition, better than original specification, independent verification available." A pause. "Who restored them?" Another pause longer. "Nora Kellner, the original craftsperson." The voice on the other end was quiet for several seconds. "I'll take the collection. $750,000 for all 14. I can have my acquisitions team in Toronto within 72 hours. The transfer can go tonight." She set the phone down on the workbench. She walked back to Nora. "You didn't need me to sell them. You could have called Pellerin the day the crates arrived. You needed them. I needed them restored. The sale was always yours to make. Why? Because they weren't mine to sell. Your father built this archive. You inherited it. I only made the panels." Camille did not answer. She put one hand on the surface of the maple panel and held it there until the warmth of the lights had gone through her palm. That Monday evening, Renwick arrived at Camille's office in Toronto with 2 of his own lawyers and a sealed envelope and the settled air of a man who had been planning something for longer than she knew. "We're ready to move. Kellner completed the first panel yesterday. We have the non-compete documentation and the attribution records. We file this week." Camille slid an unmarked folder across the desk to him. He opened it. The first page was a wire record from a Nova Scotia numbered company. October 2018, signed by him. The color went out of his face by the second page. By the 5th, his hands were not entirely steady. She pressed the intercom. "Security, please escort Mr. Renwick out." The following Wednesday, Camille walked into the Ashford Interiors boardroom with 3 folders and Nora beside her. Nora wore a clean shirt. She did not pretend it was something else. The board had been told only that the meeting concerned a significant fiduciary matter and that the COO would not be present. There were 8 board members. 2 of them had been there when Marcus was still alive. Camille laid out the evidence in 38 minutes. She did not raise her voice. The false disposal records, $5.2 million in fraudulent transactions across 7 years. The Nova Scotia company records, the London and New York wire confirmations, the $87,000 withheld from Kellner's 2020 payment, traced to an account Renwick controlled. Fletcher Dowd's notarized statement, the March 2020 letter, the addendum. The board sat very still. The lawyer at the far end cleared his throat once and asked nothing. When she finished, the silence held for almost a full minute. One of the older board members, a woman who had known Marcus for 30 years, finally spoke. "The $750,000 from Pellerin, where did it go?" "Full amount to the corporate operating account. No commission taken by Kellner Woodcraft." Miss Kellner waived any commission in writing before the sale closed. "Who restored the panels?" Camille looked at Nora. "This woman." the original craftsperson of the Ashford archive, the person my father chose in 2013 and was unable to reinstate in 2020 because he did not survive long enough to finish the paperwork. She presented the addendum, 10% equity, Heritage Craft Trustee. The vote was unanimous before she had finished reading the motion. The woman who had known Marcus for 30 years stood and walked the length of the table and took Nora's hand in both of hers without speaking. The archive program was reinstated by board resolution within the hour. Nora was named Heritage Craft Director, reporting to the CEO. The $87,000 was authorized for disbursement that afternoon, with 7 years of interest. Renwick was referred to the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit by the end of the week. When the meeting ended, Nora and Camille walked together to the elevator. The afternoon light came in flat and pale through the building's north windows. "You're not moving to Toronto. Ivy's school is in Guelph. The shop is in Guelph. I can make the drive twice a week. I've made longer drives for less reason." It was the first time she had said anything of her personal history. That was not about the work. She did not stop walking when she said it. Camille stopped beside the elevator. She did not press the button immediately. The keys hung in her hand. "Or I could come to Guelph. More often, you could." She looked at Nora. The hallway light caught the line of her jaw in the place where she had said it against the day. "Thank you, for the panels. And for the rest, the things you chose not to say. The things you let me find on my own. You don't need to thank me. I'm going to." She pressed the button. The doors opened. Nora watched her go. Then she drove the 90 minutes back to Guelph with the windows down and the radio off, the way she had not let herself drive in years. That night, in the small office at the back of the shop, Ivy looked up from her homework. "Dad, is Miss Camille going to come to Guelph to see us?" Nora sat down beside her and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The lamp on the desk was the same lamp that had been in her father's shop since she was Ivy's age. "Maybe, Peanut. Maybe." October came to Guelph, red and orange along the Speed River. The air had the particular quality of southern Ontario in autumn, clean and sharp and smelling faintly of wood smoke from somewhere down the street. Camille rented a small house on Edinburgh Road, 15 minutes from the shop. 2 bedrooms, a covered porch, a fireplace she called the rental office before she worked out how to use. She drove up on Thursday evenings and back to Toronto on Sunday nights. She did not put a name on it, neither did Nora. Camille had moved into the CEO role with a new kind of ease that the board had not seen from her before. She hired a new COO from outside the company, a man who had run a mid-sized residential design firm for 8 years and who had learned to build a budget from scratch. She spent Tuesday mornings on the phone with him going through the archive program reinstatement line by line. On Saturday mornings, she let Ivy teach her to sharpen a pencil the proper way, which involved a small knife and more technique than Camille had expected, and Ivy took extremely seriously. Nora watched from the kitchen door and said nothing. On Sunday afternoons, Nora took her into the shop. 3 new panels were on the bench. A commission for a heritage home in Westmount, figured cherry and white oak, a project she and Fletcher were 14 weeks into. Camille sat on the wooden chair in the corner and watched her work the way she had watched in the 3rd week. Except now the quiet between them was a thing they had chosen, rather than a thing she was studying from a distance. "Do you miss Toronto? I drive there every Tuesday." "That's not what I asked." Nora set down the marking gauge. She took a breath before she answered. "I don't miss Toronto. I miss a version of things I thought I was going to have that's different." Camille did not ask her to say more. They walked along the Speed River one Sunday in November, Ivy ahead of them throwing sticks into the slow water to watch the current take them. Nora and Camille walked behind her 2 paces apart. The leaves were down. The air was cold and still. My father used to say good work depends on timing. Knowing when to let the wood rest before the final pass. Too early and it tears, too late, and it closes up. You can't force it. And a life the same. They walked a long way without speaking. Ivy turned and waved from a flat rock above the water. They both raised a hand. That evening, before Camille left for Toronto, Nora handed her a small cloth bag tied with a piece of leather cord. Inside was a single-hand plane, old, restored, the sole filed true and the iron honed to a mirror. The tote had been replaced in walnut. The front knob was figured maple. On the underside of the toe, a small stamp. KW 2013. "What is this?" "The plane I used on panel 14. I re-handled it after. You should have something that was working when this started." Camille did not say thank you. She set the bag on the passenger seat. looked at Nora for one moment and backed out of the drive. The next Thursday she came back, and the Thursday after that. 6 months later, a heritage home in Westmount on a gray afternoon in April. The panels had been fitted the week before by a crew Nora had driven down from Guelph to supervise. The room was a library. 12-foot ceilings, north-facing windows, the cherry and white oak running floor to ceiling along the west wall in a pattern she had drawn and revised for 9 months. Ivy was 11 now. She stood with Nora and Camille in the library, a small notebook in her hand, checking each panel against the installation drawing with the seriousness of someone who has been part of a project long enough to know what it is supposed to look like. The client, a woman in her 60s who had bought the house for the bones of it and spent 3 years restoring it properly, walked into the room and stood still for a moment. "I've been looking at that wall for 3 years," she said. "I've been imagining what it should be, and now I'm looking at it and it's better." Nora said nothing. The client turned to Camille. "This came through your archive program?" "The original craftsperson," Camille said. "The person my father chose." That evening at the hotel, Ivy was asleep in the next room with the tree book open on her pillow. Nora stood on the small balcony above Saint Laurent. The city moved below them in the particular way Montreal moves at night, quietly busy, lights in every window, the sound of the street reduced by distance to something almost pleasant. Camille came out and stood beside her, not close, not far. He would be proud. He was proud. Before any of this, I could tell from the letter. She was quiet for a moment. The wind off the mountain was cold and moved Camille's hair across her face. "You know, I signed a document giving you $400 to dispose of 14 panels. I told you that you probably couldn't tell a workshop from a boardroom in front of my entire legal team and a room full of strangers, and those 14 panels brought you here. It wasn't the panels, I know." She looked at Nora. Nora looked back. She did not need the rest of it said. They stood at the railing for a long time. The street below moved at its own pace. Camille placed her hand on the rail beside Nora's, not touching, close. Nora thought about what her father had told her in the shop in 2013, the year she had stayed late to get the maple joint right. Good work depends on knowing when to stop adjusting. When the thing is ready, it's ready. Pushing past that point doesn't improve it. It only shows you didn't trust yourself. She thought about the 4 years since the shop had nearly gone under, about Ivy learning to use a marking gauge, about the walnut panel in the crate on the concrete floor that November morning, and the woman who had sent it there standing beside her now at a railing in Montreal, in a place neither of them had planned to be. Maybe some things had their own timing. Maybe Camille had arrived not too early and not too late. Maybe she had come exactly when Nora had learned to leave the door open again. Camille turned her face toward her in the dark. She did not speak. Below them, the street kept its long, even rhythm. In the next room, Ivy slept with the tree book rising and falling on her chest, and in the morning she would ask to see the installed panels one more time before they drove home, and Nora would say yes before she finished the question, and Camille would come with them, and none of that needed to be decided tonight. Some things did not need to be named to be known.